Today is a day I've been looking forward to for almost 20 years. I graduated from the School of Design from Carnegie Mellon University in 1999, and I'm going to be sharing 3 ways to unlock your creativity by putting your heart in the work. The first is making the ordinary extraordinary. You have to make the ordinary extraordinary by putting your heart into the work when things aren't going your way. It might not be love at first sight. So how do you put your heart in the work when love isn't first sight? And also, the second is knowing what you want and making time for it. Sometimes you have to put your heart into the work when you have a change of heart. Well, how do you do that? The third is connecting the unexpected. Sometimes you have to put your heart in the work by putting your heart on the line. So, just as another alumnus once said, this is my 15 minutes. I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C., in a place called Hyattsville, Maryland. I was a pretty bizarro kid growing up. Some things never change. And I was really into music during my high school. This is actually a picture of the lockers right outside the band room. One of my first classes in high school was music. And so there was a great expectation for me to study music once I graduated. But music was so close to my heart, I chose not to study it, and I chose to study design. So in the summer of 1994, I graduated from high school and decided to come here. And so let's get into it. We're going to talk about how to make the ordinary extraordinary. And let's start this way. This is a humidifier. This is a humidifier that you can get from the Museum of Modern Art. Here's a close-up. Pretty fancy, huh? I actually have this one in my house. This is another one. Pretty sculptural. It's actually featured in the MoMA's collection. But in the spring of 1997, in Pittsburgh, here, I was a junior, and I had a semester-long project to redesign a humidifier. And this is what they look like. Not too fancy. So I got this project, and I was like, I'm going to have to spend a whole semester doing this. And it was my junior year. I had another year to go, and I didn't really feel that this was a project that was super exciting to me. So I figured I'd have to put my heart into it to understand how to make the best use of my time. And so I tried to integrate things that I was interested in at the time. And this is a book that my professor gave me. It's called Wabi Sabi for Artists, Designers, Poets, and Philosophers. And one of the great quotes in this book was to pare down to the essence, but don't remove the poetry. There's something really simple about this approach to design and creativity where you wanted to create something simple, but not remove what was fresh or what was poetic about it. Another book that was really inspiring to me at the time was a book called Minimum by John Pawson. There was a particular spread in that book that stood out to me. On the left, there is a painting by Lucio Fontana where he literally sliced the center of a piece of canvas to create a 3-dimensional painting to use light and shadow. And then on the right is Tadao Ando architecture, very brutalist, very simple. And this is the design of the humidifier that I came up with. These are kind of some glamour shots for that product. I'll kind of explain to you what's going on here in a second. The shape is pretty interesting. There's a reason for it. So the air would intake from the sides, and air would come out from the center. You'd open it up to put the filters in. Now, filters were really hard to keep moist, so there's a reason why they're positioned this way. I thought that most humidifiers at the time were really unwieldy to bring a big water tank to the sink. So I thought, well, what if you brought water to it, just like watering a plant, which would make it a little easier to fill. You could see that little window there as a water level indicator. You turn it on, and so the reason behind this shape is that if you simply tap it on the left or right side once it's on, it literally rocks back and forth. And the reason for this is that the water sloshes to each of the filters, keeping the filters nice and moist. The fan in the center, typically most humidifiers have the fan going vertically up. This one is oscillating from left to right, so it fills a room more. And once it stops, you know that the water's out. So you have a visual representation of when to fill it. This is what it looks like when it's open and when it's closed. And I was really fortunate to win an award for this project, a National Housewares Manufacturers Award. This is a professor of mine who was a visiting professor at the time. Her name's Patty Moore. She was a gerontologist, industrial designer, pioneer of universal design. And I guess that's a result of putting my heart into it by making something ordinary extraordinary. All right, so moving on. Know what you want and make time for it. So I graduated in '99, but prior to that, I decided to take a year off between my junior and senior years. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do when I graduated from this university. You know, oftentimes you study something, and then towards the end of your tenure here, you're just not sure if it's what you want to do outside. So I made time to take a year off, and I interned at this company, Converse, footwear company. This is a screenshot of Converse right now. You could see that they're really focusing on their kind of heritage shoes, kind of old school, their classic shoes and stuff. But in the summer of '97, when I was an intern there in Boston, right outside of Boston, this was the shoe that they were promoting. They were really trying to compete as a performance brand. And, you know, I was designing performance-based shoes for a company that I felt was a little bit more about their heritage. This is the All-Star Rodman, and it's basically Dennis Rodman is the big sponsor for Converse at the time. You can see that there's tattoos kind of on the shoe to reference the tattoos on his body. And there was a commercial that had come out with him where he was expressing this idea that, you know, what do you see when you look at me? Do you see the toughest defender of all time, the hardest working rebounder in history? Maybe if I didn't have tattoos, piercings, or dye my hair, maybe if I didn't think for myself or be myself, would you see me then? So I was really inspired by that commercial halfway through my internship and told the intern manager, you know what, I had a change of heart. It doesn't really feel like I should be doing performance design shoes. It's really the company really would benefit from maybe taking a look at the brand of the company. And so the intern manager was like, okay, well, we'll take you out of the internship program and sequester you in the company archive. And I worked on this. So this was a document that I had written and done research on when I was in the company archive. These four people on the cover kind of represented Converse's people that they were really putting on throughout the history of the company: Chuck Taylor, Dr. J, Larry Bird, and Dennis Rodman. These are obviously a motley crew of people. But this was a document that I had worked on in the last 3 months of my internship. You could see that there are a lot of provocative statements in here. But at the end of my internship, I was given the opportunity to present the document to the CEO of the company. And, you know, at the end of my presentation, he asked me, do you have a job? And I was like, well, actually, I have another year to go in school. And so he told me, well, you have a job here once you graduate. So I was really fortunate to go into my final year at Carnegie Mellon with a job. I didn't end up at Converse, but it gave me the confidence that if I put my heart into it, even though I had a change of heart, that things could work out. The third thing is connecting the unexpected. So I had moved to San Francisco in 1999, and it wasn't until spring of 2004 in Cupertino that I was given this unexpected opportunity to interview at this company. You may know it. It was a very rebellious company, the crazy ones of the industry. And I was really fortunate, or at least I thought I was crazy enough to think that I could work at this company. I had never done software design before. Luckily, I had a really good friend, Imran Chaudhry, who's somewhere in the audience here, that put me on and kind of encouraged me to join the group there, the human interface group. And I remember seeing this movie with him called Training Day. And there's a quote, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And so when I went into this interview in Cupertino, I had to figure out a way to connect the unexpected. I had to figure out a way to use something that I had done to relate to something that I wanted to do, which was software design or human interface design at the company. And so what could be far from that than a kid's board game? This is a kid's board game that I had done prior to working in Cupertino, and as you can see, it's literally just a box. There are not that many ways to skin a box, but as a kid's game, you had to do something really expressive. I'll tell you a little bit about the game in a little bit. These are just some process sketches to show all the different permutations of the game. There's a key here. These are renderings. But here's the game. You take the top off. The way that it works is that you take a ball and put it in one of these chutes across the top, and they kind of randomly position themselves under these doors. And these doors have graphics on them that correspond to colors, shapes, and numbers. And so you would give a kid a card, they would look at the card, kind of determine whether or not it's a color, shape, or number, and look at the doors, use this key, and if a ball happened to be under one of those doors, you would place it into this waterfall on the right, and once they're all lined up, they would open up the treasure. So when I was working on this game, I thought a lot of the thinking that went into it could relate to user interface design, or experience design, or UX, or whatever number of names the discipline is called, because there was a thought process behind where things were positioned to telegraph to someone how to interact with it. And so I was crazy enough to bring this game into my interview. I had an interview with the vice president of software, and I brought the kids' game with me, and he looked at me, he looked at the game, he looked at me again, and he said, "This is my kid's favorite game." So, again, I put my heart on the line, and it worked out, and I ended up getting the job. So, in closing, 3 ways to unlock your creativity if you put your heart into it: by making the ordinary extraordinary, by knowing what you want and making time for it, and by connecting the unexpected to unlock your creativity. Thank you.